Welcome back to the Empower365 Podcast, where we sit down with innovators, builders, and entrepreneurs who are not just participating in industries, they're reshaping the future of them. Today's episode is one I really look forward to because we're diving into something that quietly impacts every business in America: energy. Electricity demand is rising faster than ever before. Between AI, electric vehicles, and modern infrastructure, businesses are consuming more power than at any point in history. With that comes a lot of challenges and a lot of opportunities. Today's guest is Garrett Ardis, president of Huff Energy Solutions, a company focused on helping businesses reduce energy costs while building long-term energy infrastructure through solar and advanced energy systems. Garrett, welcome to the podcast, man. Been looking forward to it.
Yes, thanks for having me. I really appreciate getting the chance to talk with you on here.
Before we dive into solar and energy infrastructure, I'd like the audience to get to know you a little bit better. Tell me about the background and how you ended up leading Huff Energy Solutions.
Sure. I'll try to consolidate this the best I can. I'm a third generation family business owner here in Central Valley, Modesto, California. My grandfather started a group called Huff Construction, which is a general contractor. My father's currently the president of that group, and then we started the energy group a number of years back. I went to college, grew up here, went to high school here, went to college at the University of Arizona. Graduated, quickly started working for a commercial real estate group, and then soon after the general contracting company. And then we got a unique opportunity. We do pre-engineered metal buildings too, which we can get into later. A partner of mine that used to work on the supplier side got approached about this new solar product they were buying, and they were looking for certified builders in America. We put our hand up as one of the people that would like to be a certified builder. We took that and then started the Huff Energy brand. From that, we then took that singular product and branched out into ground mount, rooftop mount, traditional carports, battery energy systems, storage systems, generators, you name it. So that's kind of how we got to where we are today. Really started on the construction side and worked backwards into the financial modeling, energy saving side, as opposed to a lot of folks in the industry that start on that side and then come in to learn the construction. Just different ways to enter the business.
Interesting. So what are some family business, what are some of the major lessons that the families taught you about the business?
Well, I think everyone is pretty fortunate in the family here where basically everyone that works here really cares about what they do. I think having passion for what you do is something that not only my father's father instilled in him, but he instilled in me. We've been fortunate enough to find that in all areas of construction. I don't think anything really beats hard work. We spend a lot of hours here and a lot of effort and a lot of modeling and all that kind of stuff. So I would say that we're kind of prescribers to the idea that good things happen to good people. And so that idea is that if we put in the work, we make business decisions based on what we think is doing right. We had a situation just this morning where the situation could have gone one of two ways. By rule, it was something that was out of our purview. Yet we took the opposite stance to say, this is a good customer for us. We want to make this situation right. And in turn, it became a non-cost issue because of the way we approached that, and the customer just respected our stance on the situation. So continuing to drive a business and grow a business based on good morals and good ideas are the way that my family has taught me how to do things. I'll say that one thing that they taught me really early on was that there's going to be a lot of doors open because of your family relationship. There's going to be just as many doors closed because of the relationships that they may have had, and that kind of instilled down to you. And I really feel that situation is true. And so just kind of taking the idea that when you have extra opportunity, take advantage of it. And when you have less opportunity because of those relationships, to be respectful and understand that more opportunities will come in the future.
It's interesting. Yep. There's always a flip side to the coin, right? Especially in businesses like you, big family business, well-known, well-respected. That's a good point. One thing I've noticed is electricity prices are rising, demand is rising, infrastructure is aging. From your perspective and what you guys do, what's happening in the energy market right now?
Well, it's really interesting. And Specifically in California's energy market, is it really interesting, right? So like you said, infrastructure is getting older, and at no real time. I mean, I don't have a metric to quantify this for you right now, but in my time of being in construction and really energy savings kind of modeling, this whole boom with the big energy demand that we have in the space, the data centers really driving a lot of that throughout the country. We haven't seen a whole lot of that in our market, but with the grid on the whole West Coast really being connected, but those style operations are really drawing a lot of energy into it that we didn't have when we first got into this business. You know, a lot of folks just really want to be what we call energy independent, and that's somewhat of a loaded term. It becomes really difficult to be 100% off the grid in our space, and sometimes not only is it difficult, but it's not the best financial decision for the customer. So we see a lot of it, you know, based on the new net metering rules and tariffs that they have in the California Public Utilities Commission, which governs Edison, which governs PG&E, which governs San Diego Gas and Electric. You know, we're really seeing folks that are integrating solar and battery to be as independent as they possibly can. A 60%, 70%, 80% offset, because it's one of two things. It's not just the ability to save money on your energy bills, but it's another thing to be a bit protected if there's a grid outage. You know, some of our customers in some of the more rural areas are dealing with 6-7 outages a month, right? And that becomes very difficult when they have 30, 40 individuals in a facility. This one in reference is really it's like a landfill site, so they're consistently compacting garbage in this building. When their balers go down that compact it, even if it's for an hour or two, if the guys are staying stagnant, you know, they have to leave. So by integrating solar and battery storage there, while it doesn't mean they're going to be 100% reliant on our system, we can provide backup storage that can kind of help shield them from those downtimes, as well as pretty big energy savings. So I think we'll see more and more of this sort of a quasi-energy independence in the market as rates continue to rise, as outages continue to happen. So it's this full cycle, right? It's like people put in solar and batteries because they want to be independent from what the grid offers them. By doing so, it lowers returns for a lot of the big utility companies, and for, you know, other reasons, not only to that, inflation, rising employee costs, you know, you name it, their rates have to go up to reflect this, right? Which more incentivizes people to put solar in, especially for their businesses, which is where we focus on. So it's an interesting development into the space, even in the 6-7 years we've been in the market.
Yeah, it seems like they're looking at not just as like an operating expense or treating it as just like an operating expense, but they're looking at this as a strategic economic advantage for almost their balance sheets.
Correct. Yeah, because the way that our financial modeling works is this energy cost is just an operational cost, as you stated on there. So if you're paying $500,000 a year, and we can talk about some of the financial systems that we use, but take a power purchase agreement, for example, which we can dive into later, where we build the solar system and bring in a financial partner to own it and sell the power back to this business or whatever. We can come in, and if we can sell them back the power back, you know, and this is just a 30,000-foot view of how it works at $250,000 a year that they were buying for $500,000. That's $250,000 a year of added income that they didn't have beforehand, that the solar system provides. So we see a lot of work in that space, just simply because you're just raising the net profit of the business by lowering that expense.
Yeah, that's huge. Talk to me a little bit about like your typical customer, your like ideal customer.
Yeah, so ideal customer for us is anyone that is a pretty large power user. You know, and large power users would be, you know, a couple million kilowatt hours a year of you know, kilowatt hours, and then an average demand of you know, 500 kW and above. So food processors, industrial users, depending on how the agricultural facility works, agricultural uses. Sometimes with the new net metering stuff, integrating batteries and solar can be a little trickier there because of the fact that they're only harvesting 3-4 months out of the year. Big office spaces, you know, we're seeing a lot of big offices and big retail spaces where the ownership group that's leasing out these spaces will put the solar in, and they'll do this PPA where they sell back the tenant the power at a rate that's lower than what the utility does, and then the ownership can utilize those tax credit and create an additional investment there. So, those are more or less the customers that we have. And again, these are big power users. We're working with a group right now, it's like, 1.5 million square feet of retail, right? So they have a lot of big box tenants that are on average, they have some infill stuff, but 100 to 150,000 square feet a tenant that are operating all the time. Just their HVAC load alone is a pretty large piece that you can provide a lot of savings to. Obviously, if you're a manufacturer or a food processor that's just running 24/7, those energy demands are fairly high as well.
So you're working with some big people in the industry, big companies. Kind of explain exactly like what type of systems you're implementing for them. Like, are they rooftop systems, ground mounts? Are you doing infrastructure integration?
Yeah. So in terms on the PV side, it depends on the customer and what they have available. Some customers have really, really large rooftop space with all white TPO roof, which is really reflective, right? So those become a really nice use for a rooftop mount solar system. We try to use ballasted systems up there so that way we don't have a ton of roof penetrations. Nobody likes leaks in the space. Nobody likes leaks in general, right? So the least amount we can do on that front is great. Ground mount is pretty much the first course of action. It kind of goes in terms of costing in our experience: ground mount solar, rooftop mount solar, and then carport solar. So as you can imagine, if you have the land to give and can do it on the ground, they typically do that because it's the lowest CapEx or lowest PPA rate, and then they get the most amount of savings. Secondly would be the rooftop mount and then the carports. Now, carports, sometimes people want to offer their employees covered parking. So it really depends on what the space is being used for and what they want to offer to their customers or their employees a lot of the time. Almost always in all new projects we're working on are coupled with a battery. So I would say a lot of our stuff is PV plus battery system, whether it's going to be peak shaving when rates are the highest from 4 to 9, whether it's backup batteries, as we talked about, if the system goes down. The systems use a controller deal that kind of learns as it goes. So when offsetting or off use of the power is the best, it kind of adjusts for that model. And then just by nature of it, we end up doing a lot of electrical infrastructure. We have a project right now. It's 2.5 megawatts. It's about 6 acres of ground mount covered solar. We have to run 12 kV, which is like medium voltage lines, from the solar array back to where the main service is. So, and that's a pretty good run. We have to step up the power from 480 to 12 kV, and run it back and then step it back down in those cases. So it becomes a lot of electrical infrastructure. And that again is based upon how the existing facility is running now. So you almost like backwards engineer it. You got to go out, see what kind of services they have, what are they running on now, and then sort of make your PV be adaptable to what's running with that.
Yeah, I mean, it definitely could get very complex. And I know that like solar isn't just about sustainability anymore, but it's a huge financial strategy. How do you work with your customers on that financial strategy? Like, are you with them like side by side? Are you giving them like, hey, this is going to be your ROI? Because I know that's going to be a huge selling point.
Yeah, I would say, to be honest, that is the selling point for us. We have a couple jobs where folks have some, energy goals that they're trying to meet, and that becomes a factor to the decision. But almost every time that we work on a project, it is, what is the IRR or what is the ROI, in terms of return, right? And so we have a program, it's called Energy Toolbase. We have some partners in the space that have built their own models that are really, really sharp in what they're doing, much sharper than I am, right? And we have some good people around us that work here at the company that pretty much focus on that development ROI side. But just to give you a brief overview in short about what we do and how we get to that point, is a customer will share their interval data with us. So we take the data of every 15 minutes for the entire year. We input that into our model to see at what time and how much they're using power all throughout the year, all throughout the night. Then we take our PV system and we size it based on that. We're able to kind of see when, depending on export rate and energy escalators, where kind of the sweet spot is to build the biggest system possible for them. And once we've kind of determined that, we typically run a battery scenario and see if batteries would make sense on there. The estimating team then costs it out, and then the financial modeling team takes all of that information and runs it against a traditional loan, against a sale leaseback, or against a PPA. If it's going to be a PPA, we send that out to our third-party PPA providers. They provide us with the rate and the escalator. And once we have all of that information, we have a modeled system that we're able to plug all this data in: cost, bill savings, new bill, PPA rate, debt financing, and then we're able to model and see, based on the energy savings that you have, here are the 4 funding models that you have. Here are the partners we have willing to do said funding, and this is our assessment that's your best investment on your end. That is really where the sale is made. The construction is almost like an afterthought, and so that's why I kind of go back to that original statement I had earlier, where a lot of people, they specialize on that side and then get into figuring out the construction. We knew the construction and got into this side of it. And we're very lucky to have some really, really smart individuals in the space that not only help us with this process, but run their own individual models. And then we're kind of conferring and comparing before we present it to the customer. Because if you're going to go to a customer that's, they're $1 billion plus in revenue, you better have your stuff in a row and better have it tied out pretty cleanly, because at any point, if things start to shift or fall apart, it's going to kind of lose the sale process. The pushback you get sometimes is like, how can we 100% guarantee these savings? How can we realize them, right? And so while we can't predict how much sun's going to be out in a given year, the more tools and historical data we have to feed that in to highlight their savings is really powerful in the sales process.
It's badass, man. That makes a lot of sense. Obviously, you got KPIs, but when it comes to return on investment, what do you typically see when you're working with your clients, or is it case by case?
So, it's pretty case by case, because it really depends on how you're going to fund it, right? Like if you're going to do a traditional construction loan, sometimes banks are after the relationship, right? So they may waive some sort of procurement fee for doing the loan, but they want to have portions of the banking relationship, right? And that can be a better return on the investment for your solar piece, but maybe the line of credits offered to a specific bank are not as good as the existing bank that they have. If I'm going to do a PPA, a power purchase agreement, the customer is not going to be really paying anything for the construction, right? All they're going to do is save a certain amount on their bill. So, for instance, as we used earlier, if it's $1 million to put it in and your PPA is 12 cents, the third party PPA group is going to pay that $1 million and sell you back the power at 12 cents. You're paying 20. So immediately in year one, you're cash flow positive by 8 cents a kilowatt hour. And we can calculate exactly what that's going to be. In terms of a cash deal, depends on the utility provider. In the PG&E space, we're seeing, anywhere from 2 to 4 year paybacks if you're going to pay cash and monetize the tax credit yourself. In some of those municipal utility districts, you're more in the 4 to 6 year period. But again, the monetization of said tax credit is really, really key in these equations, right? And that will change as the tax code is changing those solar credits in the years to come. But, that's really where the deal is made, right? And that's why having a good PPA partner or a good banking relationship that's going to use those tax credits instead of the customer on these deals can be pretty valuable, because, the customer doesn't have to worry about, hey, I have $600,000 in tax credit here, but I'm able to buy this piece of equipment that's going to lower my tax basis over here. And, it becomes a pretty tricky situation.
Talking about the PPA, because I'm sure there's people out there that don't really know what the power purchase agreement is. Talk to me about the power purchase agreement and why does it make sense for businesses?
Sure. So a power purchase agreement is essentially an agreement between a third party and a power consumer to buy the power. So let me give an example there. In a project, you have Huff Energy Solutions that would be the contractor. We can call it Garrett's Energy Provider, which would be the PPA company. And then you have Marco's Food Processing Group that is going to be the power consumer. So Garrett comes in with Huff Energy Solutions and he says, hey, it's going to be $1 million to buy it. The PPA company then comes and says to me, I'll pay for that $1 million. For the business, they're then curious about what the PPA price is going to be because this company is paying for the construction to act almost as a small utility group instead of PG&E and instead of Edison. And that utility group is producing power with the solar panels. So Garrett's PPA company is selling power from the solar panels per kilowatt hour to Marco's food processor in this case. And they typically do it at a rate much better than the traditional utility does. And they're able to obtain that because they're going to monetize the tax credit. So if we take that same $1 million example and we say there's $400,000 in tax credit and another $250,000 in rapid depreciation, the PPA company that's typically backed by tax equity investors or large net worth investors that have really big tax appetites can come in and monetize that credit in the deal. Now they have said $1 million deal that's $350,000. They're selling the power for $100,000 a year to Marco's food processor place, and they're able to recoup their investment in 4-ish years, let's call it. And for the PPAs are usually about 25 years. So for 21 years, they now have a system that requires very little maintenance, maybe a cleaning a year, and is making just straight cash flow from the producing of the sun. Now, why would Marco's food processing group want to do this? Well, in this scenario, they typically would be paying the utility $200,000 to $300,000 a year for power as it is. So for no money out of pocket for the business, they can take their power bill and lower it from the $300,000 a year to the $100,000 a year, creating an additional $200,000 a year in cash flow for the business. And they don't have to, they in theory could pay cash and monetize the tax credit if they had it, but it's not like an apples to apples comparison. It's not always easy to monetize the tax credit. Like I mentioned either, there's a lot of factors that businesses typically have where they're able to lower their taxable basis in other arenas. Plus, they have to come up with that $1 million out of pocket that maybe they need for normal operations. Maybe they have an expansion for their business. So for literally nothing in terms of cost for the existing business, they can lower their power bill by 2/3 in this case. That's a pretty powerful aspect. And it's not always that way. The savings aren't always that much. Maybe the customer uses a lot of power at night and we didn't know that early on, so it doesn't make it as feasible. But for the customers that check said boxes and want to just lower their bill by, 50 to 70%, and they don't have to do a thing in terms of cost, our group handles all the engineering, procurement, and construction of it and the interconnection, so that it becomes a 3-way contract between Huff Energy and Garrett's PPA company. And then there's a contract between the PPA company and Marco's food processor. We don't even actually directly contract with the food processor because we're building for the PPA company and the PPA company is selling the power back to them. So hopefully that answers your question.
Garrett, you guys are basically the energy experts, the perfect partner for them. Let's talk about energy infrastructure for a while. We're seeing massive growth in AI. You mentioned data centers, EV charging, electrification. All these require massive amounts of electricity. How do you see the infrastructure evolving over the next decade?
Well, I think kind of along the same lines of these folks that want to be energy independent. I'm not really a believer that one size fits all, right? There's talks about nuclear, there's talks about hydrogen, there's talks about solar, and everyone's kind of got their own opinion of the matter. I think to holistically believe that one option is going to be the solution would be tough. What we are seeing in a lot of these spaces is that people are trying to get that energy independence that they talk about, right? They're almost always coupling PV with batteries on all of these new builds at these data centers, while still being connected to the grid in some cases because they need multiple sources of energy to try to, address their energy demands. It's a large equation, and it's not just the data centers. That's just looking at the data centers as an individual use. It's what demand does those data centers put on the rest of the grid that now they can't determine and deliver power to all of the existing businesses because they have this one user that is now demanding so much power. So it's got a large ripple effect in the process, and I think just like anything else, we'll see the energy costs continue to go up. It's the old supply and demand. Demand is continually going up exponentially, more than we've ever seen it in our time doing this analysis. And so the supply side would then get more expensive, which, hand up is good for a solar or an alternate energy provider because you're going to try to lower those costs for the individual user.
Yeah, absolutely. It blows me away the amount of power it takes to run the United States and the world, man. I mean, it's wild. Just here in California is wild to me. Do you think we're going to see more localized energy production? We get these data centers. What's your take on it?
Yeah. I mean, I would, the data centers need constant power. I would continue to believe we're going to see these, like I said, just localize as much PV as they can possibly get, as many batteries as they possibly get, different ways of we call like a microgrid system, in my mind, I mean, it's got backup capabilities. It's like a tiered deal, right? So you're just constantly hedging your bet that if your main source of power is no longer providing it, i.e. it's dark outside, so the PV stops producing, I'm going to have 2, 3, 4, 5 different levels of power production in line, whether that's battery, whether that's fuel cell, whether that's generator, what it's going to be, that's going to protect me from being reliant on the mass production of power, which is, i.e. the utility company, right? So we'll continue to see more forms of that being implemented so that they can get as close as they can to that energy independence.
That's great. I mean, your business is going to explode. I mean, it's a no doubter. You're also going to probably have some challenges, right? So
Sure.
Talk to me about some of the biggest lessons that you've learned and some of the challenges that you may be facing.
Well, I would say, just a little bit of background on us. We've been growing pretty rapidly. I think, as I told you, we've been growing at about 250% a year consecutively, and every year we've been around. So dollar volume wise, we've grown a ton for the business size that we started at to where we are now, and we're very fortunate to have some other multi-generational partners in the construction space to help with that. But challenges really being, I brought on a sales team and everything else back in April, May of last year to continue our growth. Then the bill comes out, slashing solar tax credits, and finding a way to maneuver that on an individual scale and a business scale when really your business is, not dependent on it, but it's a very big crutch in the industry. And I think that by watching and seeing those removals and being able to adjust with new financial models that still provide really good cash savings for individuals has been a really big hurdle for us. Another hurdle for us is currently manpower. Finding, the space in today's world is we don't have as many individuals that are going to trade school. I mean, maybe now we do. It's kind of seems to be reshifting the course there a little bit. But finding folks with 10, 20 years of experience in the electrical field that can help run and teach a new generation of folks wanting to get into it, because you can have, $500 million in projects, and if you have 12 electricians that know what you're doing, you're going to be in trouble, right? So it's really just that growth stage of kind of keeping the balance, keeping the sales side at bay enough to that way the project management and the installation side can support what they do. Originally it was like, we need to build it, we need to sell. And I'm not saying that I'm the sales guy first and foremost. I'm not saying that we're relinquishing any sales, but we're definitely a lot more sensitive these days about what kind of projects we're doing, who we're working with, where we're going out there, because of the fact that we know on the back end there's a crunch coming about being able to support and deliver a good product. Truthfully, the solar industry as a whole has sort of a bad rap. And contractors specifically in the solar industry have a bad rap, right? So it's kind of trying to re-break that mold by doing a good job in the space and delivering these systems that work as intended to, while, just being put in the same box as folks that are knocking on your door every day trying to sell you power. And then in 7 years, when their grandma goes to sell their house, they realize that the solar company's got, first rate on their loan or something, right? So just trying to kind of reshape that narrative and deliver something that actually provides a value to our customers.
Yeah, you make a good point, man. I mean, finding good people, like in almost any industry, has become a challenge. I see it being a really difficult challenge in your industry with those electricians. I mean, I have some good electrician buddies that want to retire, and they just pay them more because there's not that many good guys out there. So you make a very good point.
Yep.
How are
Yeah.
you, with this whole AI just out there everywhere, right? You can't even get away with. How are you guys looking at that as a solution for your
I would
industry?
say, yeah, I mean, as I mentioned, some of the battery controllers have like what they call, our energy tool-based battery controller has Acumen AI built into it. It kind of learns and improves the process, so we're seeing it on like the technical side of being implemented to like how our systems work in the field and how they learn and gather information to be more efficient. So we see it on the estimating side. We see it on, we have a lot of past data now that we can use to really get precise in our quotes and our budgeting for other projects. And then a lot of it is really just, as I mentioned, the solar industry has so many ties to this tax. Where are the taxes? What are the rules? How do we achieve this sort of thing? And it's just a lot of verbiage and documentation, that we have to go through. And so to be able to have an AI model on our end that can run through that information, we've been building it on our end for about 4 or 5 years on the solar side, really continuing to feed it with new information, new estimates, new things like that. So that way it's educated enough to say, hey, can you please pull out what the big changes are to our individual situation based on this new bill? I mean, that's really how when the one big beautiful bill came out, we were able to digest that data somewhat quickly, is because we were taking that and we were feeding that into what it would take our team as well as our attorneys weeks to comb through. We're now combing through it in 5 minutes. And I'm not saying that we're just reading that as the rule of law. We're going back and we're getting it confirmed on our end too. But the fact that we have access to that information in 5 minutes, which would take us weeks in the past, is a really powerful tool.
Yeah, man, I love AI. But I've got a good question here. I'm so passionate about people that are entrepreneurs that are taking risks and starting something, taking an idea and starting something. It's one of the reasons I started this podcast. What advice would you personally give entrepreneurs on what they need to do if they have a good idea? You could keep it focused to infrastructure if you like. Some golden nuggets for people out there.
Yeah, I mean, this is going to sound somewhat cliche, but you can ask anyone around here. I'm a risk taker. I'm constantly trying to push the boundaries and push the narrative of what we are and what we identify as and how we can continue to grow on that side. So my big advice would be, to take a risk in whatever you're going to do, whether that's creating a product, whether that's going out there and trying to drive a new relationship-based or service business. And surround yourself with people that are passionate about what you're doing. Don't just try to find people that are just trying to make a paycheck. If you're the one out there, and that's why I've been fortunate in the space. I have a bunch of people around me that are passionate and excited about what we're doing, and they almost pull me back because I'm out there trying to push the narrative so much. And if you can get a relationship like that, I really think it's going to drive success in whatever you're doing.
Yeah, you nailed it on the head, man. I feel like I'm the same way, and sometimes I have to tell my business partners, hey, if you think I'm going off the rails a little bit with some ideas and stuff, just put me in check.
I'm kind of a yes man. I mean, I can't tell you, how many times that something is brought up on a project or something, and they said, oh, is this something you guys be able to take care of? And the answer is always yes. Yes, of course we can do that. We get in the car ride back, and my partner, who's a bit more on the technical side, it's like, how do you plan on doing that? It's like, oh, it's okay. We got the squad. We'll figure it out, and that mentality has just led to innovation. And by saying yes to some of those equations, we learn about a new sector of the energy business that now we become experts in, and we have a whole area of revenue dedicated to that, right? So that's kind of just in line with that taking risk attitude.
Yeah, I love it. Before we wrap up, I want to ask a few questions. What excites you the most about the future of energy?
Well, I would say what excites me the most is really just that the fact that you're going to be continuing to innovate and create your own sources of energy, right? Like let's take the AI piece of it, for example. Like, yes, it creates a lot of demand for energy, but it's also going to create a lot of innovation. If you look at solar panels over the last 20 years, we go out on projects all the time where they're going to be looking at an old system to do replacement. The panels are more or less the same size as they were 20 years ago. They just produce 5 to 10 times the amount of power now. And if you're going to be doing that over the last 20 years, and you're going to be able to take AI and continued innovation to improve the space and improve the efficiency of everything, I think what we'll see coming in the future here is much more consolidated and concise and good, clean power. The battery space is really excited for us in the future of energy. I think we're really just kind of coming onto our own with these batteries and the ability to use these batteries and the way that we can provide savings for the customers. We're doing some projects with the Tesla Megapack. They're, kind of a utility scale battery, but it's really exciting and innovative to work with a group like that has always kind of been on the forefront of a lot of this information and is in the forefront of a lot of the, AI push, I know. So, that's really, I think, where we're excited to see is that storage piece and how much of our revenue really turns from just PV to PV plus storage.
Good stuff. Good stuff, man. Where can people find information on Huff Energy Solutions?
Sure. So you can go to our website, huffenergysolutions.com. It's got all the contact information. It's got our team that you can reach out to. It's got a classic. If you have any questions, have any requests, fill it into the forum. It goes to our team here and it gets distributed to the right member that can answer said questions. So please please feel free to reach out if you have any further questions or just have questions about the energy market in general.
Awesome. Garrett, I really appreciate you coming on the show today, man. Energy infrastructure is one of those industries that most people don't think about every day, but it touches every business and every part of the economy. It's been great learning about what you're building with Huff Energy Solutions. Thanks for joining, man.
Thanks for having me, man. I really appreciate this.